My name is Nicholas Roman Lewis, and welcome to this session of our Impact series, Representation and the Power of Art. I'm quite excited to have this conversation in which we will reflect upon art's transformative impact both on individuals and our society. And look at how representation within art, the ability to see, hear, and understand the full range of human experiences and cultures is deeply important. Our panelists today represent a diverse array of arts and entertainment professionals, a photographer who explores visual and cultural memory in the representation of communities, a performance maker whose very body is the canvas on which truths are revealed, a director whose reimagining of the operatic stage has given new meaning to having one's voice at the table, a television producer whose work reflects the joy, pain, love, and humor of the human spirit, and a gallerist who is the embodiment of resilience, supporting, fighting for, and ultimately uplifting artists from the Arab region to the world stage. Welcome Saleh Barakat, Okpokwasili, Ethan Hurd, Holly Lynton, and Sheila Ducksworth. So let's jump right in. We're going to have a brief introductions and opening remarks from our panelists. And we're going to start with Saleh Barakat with our kind of first, your intro statement. And how do you see that your work fits into and or intersects with this theme of representation?
Well, thank you, Nicholas, for inviting me. I'm very far. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon, which is a part of the greater Levant area, a region anchored in history and known for its pluralistic diversity of its different populations. I am, for instance, a Sunni Muslim married to an Orthodox Christian. My assistant is Jewish. Some of my artists are Kurdish. My curator is Armenian. My best friend is Maronite. I mean, it's really this fantastic melting pot that I was born in and that I breathe in, that I am really concerned in promoting. And in fact, this is the Levantine identity that for me, which is multi-confessional, multi-ethnic, plural, that I work on representing in my work. So in times where I have felt in my region there is a rise of fundamentalism, of extremism, of fanatism, of uh, building walls, I believe that representing this Levantine identity, which is about diversity and multiplicity, is very important today, showing that tolerance and vivre ensemble is something that can happen in the world today. And so, having been born in a region known for its extreme violence and bloody circumstances, as as I am living it right now, uh, I thought, my project in life, I would like to be custodian of this identity, and for me, I would like to show another facet of it, not only the violent part, but also the part that talks about aesthetics, that talks about beauty, that talks about erudition and culture. So for me, my project is basically to represent the different facets of the Levant, the bad and the good one. And I believe it is necessary for humanity today to be able to show this plural, multi-confessional, multi-ethnic identity in these times of building walls and rising nationalism.
Thank you, Saleh. That was really good. And we're looking at some images from your two galleries in Beirut. And we understand, and one of the reasons I really wanted you to participate in this conversation is because we know the challenges that have been going on, in that region. And the what always strikes me is that your ability to just continue this through line of basically art and humanity and keeping that alive. We're going to just transition now to Sheila Ducksworth. Sheila has a very long history in Hollywood and comes at this from a completely, well, not a completely different vantage point, but you are the embodiment of representation itself, your work. Can you tell us about?
Sure. Absolutely. I have been in Los Angeles for 26 years. Hard to believe. Yale class of 89. And upon leaving Yale, I thought I wanted a banking career. And 5 years in, I thought, let's see, being from the East Coast, I should say, let's see kind of what's out West. And so I ended up going out with a bag and an airline flight one way. And I have not left. So I have to say, it has been a journey. It's been 26 years, as I said. I started off getting a job a month after I got there, doing things that you can imagine that you do starting from the ground up. Presently, I'm the president of a venture that unites CBS studios with the NAACP, and we are getting TV shows, projects, you name it, that are half hours, documentaries, movies, animation, um, um, unscripted, the whole gamut. We're doing everything as it relates to TV. And TV has expanded a lot in the last 26 years and beyond. It grows so rapidly, but it includes broadcast, which was always at its core, but now also cable and streaming, which, as we all know, has really skyrocketed. So it's really, an amazing landscape with infinite possibilities to fill with stories and creators, directors, you name it, talent to really put their what they do, in front of the world. And as we know, it really is the world these days, where, some platforms have over 2 million, I'm sorry, 200 million subscribers. So it's, reaching people in every corner of the world. And, when I first moved out to Los Angeles, TV was so important to me because I did see it as the most accessible medium to share ideas and spread information. Obviously, there's print media, there's books and magazines and newspapers that kind of don't exist anymore right now. Everything is digital. And then there's movies, but I really like the idea of television because not everybody, but most people have access to it, at least in our country. And I thought that it was the perfect medium to get out all kinds of true stories, fictional stories, just tales that need to be told. So I have had, I have to say, an enjoyable career doing what I do, and even starting with, as small as, excuse me a second, starting with, I think that's my phone. There we go.
Hallelujah.
Um, I think that was my timer. But starting with my first producing credit, which was back probably just over 20 years ago. I did a small movie called Maniac McGee for Nickelodeon, which most people would not recall, but it stars an unknown Michael Angarano and Kyla Pratt. And so I always look at that as something that was, kind of the start of it all. And then, of course, moving into really one of the most iconic African American centric dramas that there ever was, which was Soul Food, the series, and doing 5 seasons of that. There's been a lot of stuff in between, but that was my start, and I'm looking forward to continuing on.
Thank you, Sheila. And speaking of tales that need to be told, we're going to switch to Ethan. And Ethan, I'm going to play your video from shortly. Let me just pull it all up here. The magic of Zoom. And let me make sure that it's
Nun spür ich mich linde samt säusender Luft und ist nicht mein Grab mir erhellt. Ich seh wie ein Engel im rosigen Duft sie tröstend zur Seite bestellt. Ein Engel Leonore in der Götten sogleich still, der führt mich zur Freiheit ins himmlische Reich. You want the truth, you want the truth, you want the truth, but you don't want to know.
So I like that you want the truth, but you don't want to know. Ethan, can you tell us about your journey thus far?
Yes, thanks, Nicholas. And it's an honor to be here with you all today. I'm Ethan. I am the co-founder, co-artistic director, and producer of Heartbeat Opera based in New York City. You just saw our trailer for Breathing Free, one of our current projects. We created it during the pandemic in quarantine in October and November last fall and debuted in December. We're in the process of sharing it, hopefully around the country and the world right now. And it really is our effort as a company to make an opera that sings Black Lives Matter and really manifests that both on screen and behind the scenes, as we say, like in our art and our administration. We're very much in process and growing and trying to make the incremental change that we need to as a company and hopefully be a leader in the opera industry, which has a lot of growth, as you can imagine, to do. I founded Heartbeat with another Yalie, Louisa Prosky, and two co-music directors, also Yalie's, about 7 years ago. We're in our 7th season. And we really sought out to make opera accessible and to show younger folks and folks who might normally be intimidated by opera or think that it's not for them and not welcoming to them, that it is in fact a place where we can build community and make a loving space for sharing music and drama. I grew up singing and dancing around the living room and have always believed in the power of music and theater coming together to really manifest harmony in our world and build community, true community. So one of our calling card productions before Breathing Free was a production of Fidelio in 2018, Beethoven's only opera, where we collaborated with 6 prison choirs around the country. And if you know the story of Fidelio, it's about a wrongfully incarcerated man who is rescued by his wife, who disguises herself as a correctional officer. And when we decided to produce Fidelio, I knew that I wanted it to be a contemporary American version and indeed a Black Lives Matter version. And we saw Florestan, one of the protagonists, as a Black Lives Matter activist. And we saw the warden of this prison as a corrupt white supremacist. And we actually made this back in 2018 and returned to it again this fall and wove it into Breathing Free. And I'll just say that working with incarcerated singers changed my life. It changed our company, and it changed what I think of as representation. We approached these choirs with a lot of humility, not knowing would they even be interested in singing in a German opera. But what came to be over the course of weeks and months of many emails and phone calls and visits actually to the facilities was incarcerated folks want to be seen and known in the world. And in America, we do such a horribly good job of ignoring those folks and making them feel invisible and uncared for. And I think this project, in a small way, created a network of more than 100 incarcerated singers and 70 volunteer outside singers who could come together across state lines and share their voices and literally harmonize together. And it became a movement much, much bigger than I could have ever hoped for. So in a way, it has shaped, I think, Heartbeat's future and my intentions as an artist.
Thank you, Ethan. So you've touched upon looking at a particular constituency with the prison population and showing how that your artwork has helped to transform what people's perceptions may be. I'd like to switch to Holly to talk about whose work really looks at those notions of community. And Holly, I'm just gonna get your PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas, and everybody. As a photographer, I think about the word perception and how it relates to representation. While photographs represent the world at one particular moment in time, whether they are people or the environment, I believe photography also has the ability to represent what we can't see or what we don't stop to see. What may not be obvious until we fix the moment in time and create a new context that is the image. For me, images that express a kind of ambiguity or leave room for questions have the most power, the ones that may have many meanings. For 12 years, I worked on one series of photographs for which I initially searched for specific individuals who were working in nature in a way that allowed for vulnerability. People who worked directly with their hands, in tandem with their environment, rather than with the idea that they would conquer it. And yet they still gathered sustenance. At the time, many photographers were portraying the effects of big agriculture on the environment and how it was devastating our natural resources. I was interested in finding people who worked or acted in another way, a way that honored the land and made them good stewards of it. Very quickly, my series changed to being about representing various regions in the US and the community rather than specific people. I became interested in representing what sustainability meant to people living and working in rural America, beyond what the media portrayed in terms of organic farming. I wanted to honor their hard work and show another side to labor from what has often been portrayed in historical images of labor. I wanted to represent the beauty I saw there. My way of working is such that I return many times over a period of many years to photograph. And where I am initially an outsider, I hope to gradually become a part of the community. This is the only way I can accurately represent a portion of what I encounter, because it's not to say I'm representing an entire community. But still, my goal is to tell a complete story, or one with many facets and nuances rather than a small slice. I am also aware and even delight in the fact that photographs alter reality. My photo making is a collaborative act with those I am photographing. I'm not dipping in unobserved, making photos and then leaving. With my more recent work, I've been conscious of the cultural visual memory that is drawn upon when interpreting images, and whose culture that is, whose history. In some of my images, what I am photographing is not what is conjured in the mind when viewing the image. We may see another meaning or reference instead because of the cultural visual memory we hold. I'm fascinated by how our minds draw upon this catalog of images in our head constantly when interpreting photographs. I think about what motivates us and carries us through, and recently that's brought me to faith, which will be a focus of a new body of work. When we hear the word faith, we often think of religious practice. I want to explore how faith infiltrates many aspects of our daily lives and how we embody it. I will be looking at the religious history of the US and remaining structures of the past, as well as current practice. I want to end with my interest in movement and gesture. My favorite way to photograph is to watch people at work, engaged in play, just moving for hours, to photograph the quintessential gesture at the right moment, and then see how gesture, environment, and light combine to create the image. When frozen on film, a gesture or relationship of gestures between two people may create a new meaning beyond what was happening in the scene in reality. Photography has the power to change the meaning of the moment. To me, that is magic. And ultimately, I aim to represent humanity and all the messiness that brings. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. I can't wait to get a little more into that. So we're going to move from what you call, this. It's actually not a static image, but it's a photography. It's full of life, and we're going to switch to someone who is a performance maker. And I like my little description that you're canvas, so I hope you liked it. But if we can, Okwui, tell us about, your intersection on with this topic of representation in art.
Well, yeah, I think that I have to kind of echo and piggyback off of what Holly just said, particularly in terms of movement and, capturing people in the act of in a task, right? In something that they are committed to, engaged with. And I feel like a lot of the movement that I create is task-based, it's durational, it takes a long time, and sometimes it asks the audience to sit with the performer, with me, or the folks that I work with in that task, and allow multiple sensations to happen. Allow the expectations that they may have had about how they should be perceiving or viewing the bodies in front of them shift and change in actual and real time, right? And so particularly I'm interested in African American women and the Black body and the performing body and all of the things that we expect of us when we see us on stage, right? Or the fact that we expect to see a lot. I work also with my collaborator, my partner. We work with a lot of shadow. We occlude images. There are many things sometimes you can't see. And I feel like the expectation when you see a Black body or a brown body on stage, I should be able to see everything, sit and judge with my sort of distance. I want to trouble that. And I think that's part of the problem. I think sometimes we rely too much on sight. I think there is sensation and perspective that comes from what we hear, what we feel, what we smell, and how do we awaken all of that? And so I feel like in my work, I do that, even though I am also thinking about stories and personally in my body or the bodies of the folks I work with, what can we do even in that durational practice to open up channels and portals to the past? So what I gave to Nicholas is a small clip from a piece called Poor People's TV Room. And it was my attempt to be connected to women in 1929 in southeastern Nigeria who were protesting colonial practices. And it was my thinking, I don't know them, I can't remember them. So I was doing research and wondering, and I started to sort of engage in practices where I would continually be moving and to see, could I engage in, what could I find? What could I open up? So I think the clip you're going to see, sorry, Nicholas, you're like, when am I going to start this clip? Because you still talking. I know. But what you're going to see is me also thinking about the role of the market pre-colonial Nigeria. I think, in England or in the West, a lot of women were relegated only to the private sphere, but in southeastern Nigeria in particular, women were in the public sphere, they were in the market, they had their own money, they were engaged, they were determining how the market was run. And so the problem with the colonial sort of empire in that space was they just didn't know what to do with the women. They didn't understand. And so they were in conflict and the women sort of fought back. So some of what I was doing, what you're going to see, is gestural work that was inspired by me thinking about the market, also traditional postures of holding your wares on the head. I will let you show it now. This is sorry. And so you're also hearing, my partner and I, we make the music together. So this is also, this song is a song that I've made. It's called Get a Hold of Me. And it's and this part also is a woman she's thinking of, there are other things holding on to her and she's trying to get a hold. And what's the loss? And there are about 4 parts and then a solo part. It's all my voice and then with some of that like radio static. So we also do think very much about making sound and the environment and the space and darkness and material, and how all of those things are redounding and resonating and in relation, and create a particular space and world. And so you can see here part of the set. So that's a long plastic set, and so then this woman is almost a shadow of this woman. And so this is happening. I'm behind, I am further upstage. So there are these multiple spaces that are occurring and colliding. So I'm just trying to sort of push also certain aesthetic spaces that we expect when we go into a performative space. I'm like, how do we create an entire ecosystem filled with blackness?
That's a very good point to jump off of. So thank you all of you for your intro statements and giving our audience a little a taste of what your work is. I want to tell everyone who's watching this that we'll have links in the descriptions, and we hope that you explore more of their work. But one of the questions I want to put on the table, as I sent to you all before, is that, this last year has been dystopian. That's the best word for it. It's kind of cliched, you would never, fiction is something you wouldn't believe it, right? So it's fiction. But if we wrote this, we wouldn't believe it. I don't know if Sheila would say like, nah, I can't make that movie. Nobody would believe it, right? So I want to put on the table how in this particular time has your art sustained you? How have you may have used it to continue your message? How have you used that medium to get you through or to continue to cause change? I want to start with Saleh, who has reached home and probably can speak very specifically about the varying natures of this time.
Okay, actually, I must say I live in a very dystopian situation. Lebanon in the past year has gone through really everything. I mean, a total economic collapse, a total political collapse. We had COVID, and then we had this unbelievable explosion on August 4 that was considered the third biggest explosion after Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So it's really very hard. My house was destroyed. My gallery was destroyed. One of my closest collaborators died in the explosion. So it's really very tough. We have no money. We have everything is really literally destroyed around us. No electricity, no internet. But nonetheless, I think art is really amazing because the artist, in the isolation of his atelier, somehow has the capacity to create a kind of a snowball. He does what he wants to do. He expresses what he wants to express, and he throws it to the 10 people, 20 people around him who convey that to more and more and more. So yes, art is an amazing way to make change in very difficult times, because we cannot recur maybe to politics, we cannot recur maybe to religion, but what can I do on a personal level? I go express myself and just show my art, which will create the ripple effect that can make change. I truly believe that art can change the world. I have many examples in my life where one person, I can give a very quick example of Joslin Sahab, one of my artists. She's the late Joslin Sahab now, made this movie about female circumcision in Egypt. It's a common practice in Africa, and in fact, she wanted to make this movie about it, and she was accused of being a heretic and anti-religious and blah blah blah. She lost all her money, but because of this lady who did alone this movie, lost all her money and lost all her stability in her life, the Azhar University in Egypt had to take a decision that they never took in 1400 years of Islam, which is to say that no, female circumcision is anti-Islamic, and they saved millions of women by this lady alone, and she's a Christian, by the way, was able, with a movie she did, to really change the lives of millions of Egyptian women and probably African women. So yes, art has the capacity, because one artist alone can function. He doesn't need, of course, we need support, of course, we need help, but if none of it is available, we can still function.
Thank you, Saleh. You know, picking on that point, I'm thinking of Ethan. So you literally took the time of that we're living in and influenced the operas, the work that you're doing. So is there a connection with how you're, you know, continuing to look at this time? I mean, was that work that you were thinking of before this time? And, you know, can you tell us about that?
I will, and I just want to acknowledge everything Saleh just said. My heart goes out to you, and that is, I am so moved and sorry to hear of your loss. I'm sending you good vibes. Yeah, you know, over the summer, when we started to reckon with the country and the world with George Floyd's murder and the scores of other murders of Black folks, we really took a hard look at our work as a company. And we had been doing reimaginings of operatic classics, which had been defined for us as old white guys, mostly dead white composers and lyricists. And we knew we wanted to change that immediately. And we wanted to make something that could bring grace into the world, love, healing, a vision of justice, a vision of breathing free. You know, this lyric that actually comes from the Prisoner's chorus in Beethoven's Fidelio. And so it was about putting together a company, a diverse company, but a company primarily of Black artists, and empowering them and asking them to share their beauty with the world. And it was this new venture too for us, because we were making our first opera film and collaborating with a filmmaker for the first time as a lead artist, and making really a series of music videos. We called Breathing Free a visual album, a la Beyonce. And it was, I mean, a humbling, exciting, exhilarating, exhausting experience to really be making it in the thick of the election and the pandemic and the racial reckoning. So I'm proud of what we made. I'm humbled by it, and also just excited to build on it and keep growing in that direction. You know, we made a lot of mistakes making it, and so there's some deep learning and sort of self-examination that's ongoing.
Thank you. Sheila, has this time seen different types of projects coming across your desk? You're muted, just.
There we go. It's interesting because I've always been in the lane of Black stories from really the beginning. And so it's been at the beginning of my career, I should say. So it's been over 20 years that I've kind of lived in this space. And the projects have actually always been there, but they haven't always been, in a position to be, make it to screen. And so I have to say that there's always been great stories. Now is just a time where I think that people are giving those stories the recognition that they deserve. So I think now is a really incredible time in terms of television and diversity and getting those stories out. Certainly there are all different kinds that, stories change with the times. There are a lot of things that no one would even conceive of, years ago. And those are finding, entry points as well. So I would say that now is really an explosion of diversity in terms of people being putting their projects out, getting reception toward them, and as you can see, actually getting on the air, which was always a hurdle. So it's really wonderful to be in a space now, especially comparing to the climate in years past, where really anything is possible.
I love that. Holly, has this time, or I know it has, how has this time impacted your practice?
Yes, thank you. Certainly. So there are a couple of projects that I had begun prior to the pandemic, and both of which were sort of halted because I either couldn't get there, or one is Methodist camp meetings that take place in South Carolina every year. And that project, I'm photographing racially separated camp meetings. So it's a, complicated multi-year project for which I actually returned to Yale in 2019 to do a history research fellowship. So for me, one thing that's become really integral to my work in the last several years is the research component, because wherever I photograph in the US, in rural communities, if I'm dealing with the agricultural history or the history of the land, there's atrocity. So I'm, in my work, trying to figure out how to address that and present it and intertwine it with the photographs. I'd really love to, when Okwui presented her performance and the shadow and light, I love that because that's actually something that I just started to play with more. I mean, I'm always playing with light, but so what happened was I wasn't able to go where I thought I was going to be able to go. And, I watched people create projects out of this time, and I really felt like I needed to find something that was authentic to me. So I did two things. One, I started photographing siblings, and mainly teenage siblings, starting with my own two, but also, friends and family and whoever was willing, and using really deep shadow. And I wanted to use the deep shadow as this way to connect figures and create, almost a negative space, if you will, or another shape. And I suppose to allude to what we are going through right now emotionally, but also, again, to point to the beauty of intimacy in these relationships and these siblings who, at first, when I started the project, were the only people of their age who could touch each other. But of course, it's opened up a whole bigger project about what does that mean, and what does intimacy mean in our culture? Like, so often we cross over into sexuality, where it really is something, intimacy in itself is beautiful. In terms of the project and wanting to explore faith, I was able to do some things locally. I've been trying to make what I call these, I loosely call them faith portraits, mostly because I approach individuals and ask them if they want to collaborate with me, and what what faith means to them, and how they want to present it. So again, I'm wide open in this process. I had planned to work with some dancers doing contact improv, which again was, we weren't able to do that. So I had to photograph them singularly, or dancing as a group, but without them touching each other. So for me, it's been you know, it's been a time of both connecting to individuals and other artists through conversations like this that has completely sustained me, and I think broadened our view and just make me so appreciative of the greater arts community. And then it's also allowed me to experiment and create new work and you know, just be an artist.
Wow, thanks. Thank you for that. Okwui, the experimentation in this time, how can you tell us about how this time has impacted your work?
Yeah, so I have to ask for forgiveness in advance. I'm in New York, my heater's coming on, it's an old building and it's a lot of It's true that I have recorded some of it because I wonder about material I can use because it's very annoying but kind of interesting. You know, it's part of this time. So I just have to sort of echo almost everyone. I feel like, first of all, that sense of these stories are here, right? Ethan, you know, the project you're doing with the prisoners, that absolutely speaks to this moment of like who's been invisible, right? We know that a lot of people who are incarcerated have been getting sick, and we've started to become clearer about the conditions that they're in. Even after Michelle Alexander's incredible book, right? What was it? It's the book that sort of highlights the fact that, you know, the end of slavery, the new Jim Crow wasn't the total end of slavery, the loophole for prisoners, right? We can stop enslaving except for those folks. And, you know, Sheila, you say, yeah, these stories are there. They've been there. You know, we're not just starting to generate the material, right? But it's interesting because Saleh, I feel like there's an edge, the kind of precarity that I am disconnected from, as much as this moment felt precarious, as much as COVID felt like, oh, the world is completely changed as we know it. To some degree, you know, there's so much that I can rely on, so much that I can take for granted that you obviously can't. And so, but I do think that a lot of my work is about trying to get where we are right now and uncover what is there that we have been missing and avoiding. And so right before the pandemic, I and my partner had been making space for the creation of an improvisational song with the public. And we would ask people the question of what do you carry and how in turn does that carry you? And it was a space of a song that would consist of and contain the cry, the scream. And it's interesting because it's a private space, a space of practice, but I did extract about 5 minutes from the practice that we were doing in February, which requires people to be in very close proximity, singing, screaming, crying, shouting together, walking very slowly. And the piece that I extracted was someone calling out, breath, give me breath. And so the first part of this 5-minute excerpt is this call for breath. And we did this in February of 2019, just months before George Floyd, right before Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. But the idea of like, how do we get to the thing that is there, right? Collectively, communally, how do we call out to each other? How are we in relation to each other? How are we building possible spaces for restoration, recognition? And so that was what I was working on. And then COVID happened and people, you know, singing together in that close proximity, right, could bring death, could be lethal. So the very thing that I was shaping as this restorative healing space, this space to kind of be with each other in a non-judgmental but creative way, was bad and dangerous. And so that stopped. So I have been sort of thrust back into, yes, working alone, working with my partner who is my collaborative partner. But so much of the work I do is about relationship of people to each other, audience to each other. You can hear that. Can you hear that? Do you like that?
You can start singing and going along with you.
Did you start? Right? Ooh, that would be so great. Can someone get like sort of baseline? Can we start doing that? Building that choral. I'm ready, Nicholas. Can we start to bring a choral? Like,
I don't think you want me singing.
Don't worry about singing. You could be screaming. Anyway, so that's
the next webinar. Okay. But what I'm taking from that is that you know, there's resilience. I mean, you said that you didn't have the same precarity as perhaps, you know, Saleh and the folks on the ground in Beirut, but, you know,
or people in Nigeria where my family's from, you know, in the village, you know, but
quite honestly, people walking down the street in the US of A, right? But I wanna, because there's that reality, and I think all of your work in different levels touches upon a baseline reality, how people experience things. I want to switch because we're coming very short on our time, and this is really just an opportunity to get people to talk and get some of these issues out there. But I want to switch on just a moment. So we talk about representation, we talk about the power of art, all of these things, these ideas, right? That and ideals that are out there. But how do you, as business people, yes, you know, artists, creative, how do you, rent's got to be paid, kids got to go to school, all that kind of stuff. And this is really something for a lot of our watchers. How do you balance that bottom line, the business needs with, you know, with this goal and this desire to make sure that you are representing, right? And we can just jump in with that one, anybody. Or I'm gonna call on you. Saleh. Are you muted? I think you may be muted. Yeah.
Really, on November 1, 2019, we woke up, all the banks in Beirut did capital control. Suddenly, we were told that we have no access to our money. And somehow, all our savings evaporated somehow. So we needed to keep on operating. And here, I don't want to look like utopian, but in fact, it depends on your project. I mean, if your project is very commercial and driven towards making profits, you go in one direction. And if your project is about some kind of an engagement, social, political, aesthetical engagement, and you are defending a certain identity in art that you believe in, you have to find solutions. I've been in this business for 30 years, out of which the first years were very difficult, but then I knew some very good years in my life. And the last 2 years were extremely difficult. And I took the decision from day one that it's like the question of marriage. In good times, you benefit. In bad times, here comes the price to pay. And so I decided to stand with my people and keep on paying all the salaries, whether we are open or not, whether we are making money or not. It's a balance. Money is extremely important. It's quintessential for the continuation of the job. But at the same time, when you have this engagement towards you consider yourself a custodian of a certain identity that you need to defend, you have to find out the balance. I'm finding it. I am selling a lot of my inventory that I accumulated throughout the good years in order to spend it on my employees and artists and collaborators in the bad years. And then the cycle will go on, and then we'll come back to make money. We believe. It's a question of belief.
Question of belief. Sheila and Ethan, on that point of the bottom line, because I think your work, I mean, you've got people to report to in some sense or the other, or there's, you know, things that are coming through. How do you both deal or look at that? I know Sheila, you said the stories were always there. It may be slightly easier to make them now. You know, how are you looking with balancing that bottom line, but making sure that the voices are out there, you know, butts are in seats, all that kind of stuff?
Well, what I do is, I put together projects and put them on a slate of things that I think will give us a real mix of, kind of audiences as well as, kind of the formats. And so, clearly there's a lot of consideration just knowing the business and how what's going to get us further, kind of going in one direction. For instance, if we do something that has the potential to come back for seasons and seasons and seasons, that's one consideration. And you look at that against something that's a really important story that just might be, a 2-hour movie, which is a huge investment. And that one-off is something that people will watch one time. And if they want, to watch it again, then there's that. But there are very different economies of scale and a lot of things in between too in putting together those projects that I choose to put on the slate. And I do look at them in terms of what's important. There was a lot of sacrifice that's gone into us being in this position. When we talked about the last question about kind of the difference between TV today versus what it was in years past. There's a lot of sacrifices, as there always has been, a lot of bloodshed, a lot of people that, literally gave themselves to make this a better and more a world that has more equity in it. And so it's important to tell the stories that are important, regardless of kind of where that might lead us down the road. But I do, in managing and putting together our slate, I do pay close attention to making sure that, there is a mix of things that I think people want to see, and I think also will pan out in the end.
Thank you. Ethan, on that point?
I see a lot of synergy in social justice work and the art that I want to make and that Heartbeat Opera wants to make. So actually, the fundraising has been going really well in that it's harder for me, in fact, to raise money to an escapist, quote unquote, like frivolous opera. It's easier for me to raise money for a piece that has a message about social justice and community. And I think there are a lot of funders right now who want to support that work. I'm very fortunate to say we've developed a community of supporters who authentically care about the art and the work. And so the pandemic has really forced us to go back to the fundamentals of developing authentic relationships with each donor and audience member, and slowing down and saying, how can we use technology like Zoom to actually gather folks together in a virtual space and talk to them in an intimate way? We found over the course of 32 virtual Zoom soirees that we hosted in May and June that we had more face-to-face time with our community of donors than we had ever before. And so we're trying to embrace this new world and really be nimble about how we create events, because we can still have together time.
Thank you. So our time is drawing to a close, and I want to give everyone just a brief minute to give kind of a final closing statement, and then I'll try to wrap it up. But before you give your statements, I just want our audience to know that please explore all of the links for these and the projects of our panelists today. So maybe we can start with final words from Holly.
I was hoping you were going to call on someone else. So, yeah, I mean, I've just been absorbing everything. And, I think ultimately there are so many stories to tell, and, so much important work to be done. And I think that sometimes we come from a place of fear, fear to speak, fear, as artists, of how our work is going to be interpreted. At least I do. And I think that, hearing Saleh's comments in the beginning about, the multidimensional aspects of our world, of people, and to me, all of that is so important. And yeah, I mean, it's just, it's been, you know, it's building community, and the more we as artists have the courage to speak up and to engage in that dialogue. And, you know, for me, it's rethinking, it's a process. I mean, when I'm photographing a community I'm not from, you know, it's a process of learning and discovering. And I hope that presenting the images, you know, somebody will discover and learn along with me, and maybe change a point of view, or engage in a dialogue. So, I mean, ultimately, the work sustains me. I put it before the finances and make life choices that enable me to make it. And yeah, now that, you know, I look forward to keeping in touch with everybody here, and you know, seeing what dialogue and further conversation we can create together.
Thank you. Okwui, final words?
So I guess my final words are that just don't stay in anybody's box, you know, break the boxes, you know, break the expectations. People say, I'm a dancer, I'm this, they're constantly wanting to contain what I do. No, I do performance, I do theater, I make sound. Always, you know, sort of don't allow anybody to define you or define where you belong, and think about relation. I always think about being in relation to someone, in relation to institutions, because even financially, I think that sometimes it's, you know, when you're writing grants, and that's maybe my world, or, you know, hopefully winning a grant or something, but generally there are institutions that are looking to support you, places that are trying to rethink, you know, who has been invisible in their spheres. How do you build relationships with those folks, bring them along, ask for what you need, continue to ask for what you need, ask other artists, what do they get when they ask? Just like think about being in relation, asking questions, and opening up new possibilities always. That's my thing.
Thank you.
The end.
Saleh, do you have any final words for us? I think you're muted still.
And hi, sorry. So as Holly said, I mean, art and artists do open horizons in a world that is getting gloomier and gloomier. Humanity is beautiful in its diversity, and this is exactly what art is about. So while other people kill and make wars, we show that the world is worth living, it's beautiful, and it's not easy, because art also is very tough to achieve. But at least we don't kill, we don't spill blood. Our weapons are pens and brushes and music and photographs, and this is, I mean, really, we are extremely, in these times, art is extremely important. It's not about luxury, it's about an expression for a better world.
Thank you. Sheila, final words?
I would just say, you know, I come from a place where I sell to buyers, but I will say, for the people that I work with, all the creators out there, the people that make the art, that write the scripts, all of those people, I would just say, never give up. There's not a time limit on the things that are good. I can say that I have looked to put things up that didn't make it at the time. One in particular, 8 years later, an executive came back and said, remember that thing that you did with me that long ago? I think we want to make it, out of the blue. And so all I can say is, if you have a story, stick with it. A lot of it is timing. And I just say, you know, keep pressing on. And we all need to, on all sides, the people that are actually creating it, and the people that are trying to get it made, and the people that are actually buying it, to get these stories out, and they do change the world.
Thank you. Ethan, final words from you?
Yeah, assuming that I'm speaking to a group of Yale alumni and supporters of the arts, I would say, as a performing arts maker and producer, we're hurting. And it's going to be a couple of years, several years of healing and rebuilding. And so if the audience members out there can open their hearts, open their wallets, open their minds to coming back and taking safe risks in terms of re-engaging with the arts, because we need those bold, supportive audience members right now more than ever. And I think we'll see in the coming months lots of experiments with how to bring people back together to experience art. So I'm hoping we'll have some curious and experimental audience members with us.
Thank you, Ethan. And I just want to close in thanking all of our panelists today. I know your time, I thank you for your time and energy, and I look forward to seeing all the work that you continue to do. I want to thank our audience for watching us today, and to have you, if you want to learn more about our Impact series, to just go to the Yale Alumni website, where you can find a whole host of different programming. And I want to say, let's do this when COVID lifts, and we can do this in my living room. So until then, thank you all for joining us today.